the right in the attributes inspector for the table view controller. Down towards the middle there, there's refreshing, and I'm switching it now from disabled to enabled. Okay, it says refreshing is what it says under this kind of covered there. And when I hit enabled, watch the document outline on the left. Okay, the document outline on the left, something's going to be added. Okay, which is whoop, a refresh control. Now, it only shows up in the document outline because it doesn't really exist anywhere except for when it's animating. So that's the only place that you can see it. But you can control drag from it into your table view controller, right? And put some method there that goes and forks off some thread on another queue to go reload this table. And you just say begin refreshing at the beginning. And then once it's all finished loading, when you dispatch back to the main queue, you're going to say end refreshing. Question?
When you end refreshing, does that make it disappear?
Yes. When you end refreshing, the little spinning thing boop, collapses back up. So the table view hides it. And if you begin refreshing, boop, it'll show it again. Okay, and remember, user pulling down on it causes this message to be sent. Refresh in this case, right? But it's just target action. You can do anything you want. You don't have to do it. If you don't control drag something, then pulling down won't do this. Okay. What if your model changes out from under your table view? Okay, so your table view is running along fine, and then all of a sudden the model changes in some fundamental way, like it completely changes. The model download a completely new set of information. You can call this method in table view called reload data. And when you call reload data, it's going to call number of sections, number of rows in section, to get table, self or row at index path over and over and over again to reload the entire table. So this is a fairly heavyweight operation. It's going to completely redo your whole table. But if your entire model changes, this might be an appropriate thing to do. Okay, that's certainly going to happen in our demo that we're going to write today. You can be, if you know the changes in your model, more finer tuned. You can call methods like reload rows at index paths and only change those rows. So it's kind of more fine-tuned reloading of your UI when your model changes, if you know what changed. Okay, and there's some other methods too. So familiarize yourself with UI table view. You'll find out the kind of things you can do. There's dozens of other methods in UI table view itself. It's a scroll view. UI table view inherits from scroll view, so it's got some nice methods for scrolling to certain rows, so it happens in a nice animated way. You can set those headers and footers that we talked about at the very beginning, things like that. So you should familiarize yourself with UI table view also and all the things you can do to configure it the way you want. And you can configure it also in the storyboards in the inspector there. Okay, so that's it for table view. Any questions on table view before we go on? Okay, now we're going to talk about universal applications. Okay, a universal application is a single app that will run on iPhone and iPad. Okay, single app. And how do we do that? How do we make it so it works on both? Because they're kind of different idioms, right? You got a lot more screen real estate in an iPad. And the answer is we have two separate storyboards. So we have the same view controllers usually, and we just have different we arrange them in a different way in another storyboard. So we have two separate storyboards, okay? And they don't really share anything, although you can copy and paste things between them. You'll see me doing that, but they don't really, there's no way to like link them, okay? They're really separate. And that's because the UIs want to generally look quite different, okay? They're gonna have the same functionality, so the same MVCs, but they're gonna be drawn in different places on screen. How do you create a universal application? Well, when you say project new, one of the questions there is, what platform do you want to create this for? iPhone, iPad, or universal? Okay, if you hit universal, you'll get two storyboards, and you're on your way. If you have an existing app that's only iPhone or only iPad, then you have to actually change your project settings. And this is the first time in this class we've looked at the project settings. You get to them by clicking on the name of your app in the upper left-hand corner of the navigator there. See where it says Imaginarium? And you'll see all these properties. Well, in the General tab, see where it says General in blue there at the top? There's some general project settings. And the second one is deployment info, which is where you're going to deploy this. So this app is iPhone only because it says under deployment info, deployment target 7.0, devices iPhone. So I'm going to change that devices iPhone right there to say universal. And when I change that to universal, it's going to offer to copy my existing storyboard to the new storyboard. So in this case, it's iPhone, copy it to iPad. I recommend against this. I recommend saying don't copy here. And if you say don't copy, then you'll have to make the storyboard yourself. And the way you do that is with new file. That's how we make everything new in Xcode. And when you go to new file, you go, instead of saying Objective-C class or something, you go down to where it says user interface. That's the third one down right there, see? And then inside there, you can make a new view or a new window. You're going to make a storyboard. So you click storyboard. It's going to say, what kind do you want? I want an iPad storyboard. Put it in the same place that your existing storyboard is, which is probably going to be a directory called base.lproj in the main project, but just go find your other storyboard and put it in the same place. You probably want to give it a good name like main underbar iPad or something like that. And then put it in a group, a good group. You see down there I've put it in the Imaginarium group, the top level group. And then now I have this iPad storyboard. You see it at the top of my file navigator there in the main underbar iPad.storyboard. So now what I need to do is tell, in my project settings, tell Xcode that that's the storyboard I want to use for iPad. And I do that by clicking on where it says iPad there in about the middle of the screen. Right now it's saying iPhone. So I'm going to click on iPad. It's going to switch over. And then I'm going to say my interface file, main interface there, is main iPad.storyboard. Okay? Now it's going to use that storyboard whenever it runs on iPad. Okay? If you forget to do this step, then when you run an iPad, it's going to look like a gigantic iPhone. The interface is just going to be a gigantic version of your iPhone 1. So you'll quickly realize, oops, I forgot this step. I got to go back and do this. Okay? All right, so now we've got this app, and it's got two different storyboards. Why is storyboards different? In what ways are they different between the two? Well, on an iPad, we have a couple of other view controllers that we can use to put MVCs on screen. One is the split view. So split view is where we're going to split the screen up into two MVCs, kind of a narrow one on the left and a bigger one on the right. You see that? And then also popovers. Popovers are where we're going to pop an MVC up in a little rectangle. So that little white area where the equations are there, that is a little table view that's popping up in a popover. Okay, so we're going to talk about split view and popover and how those work. But first, in your code, how can you tell you're on an iPad so that you can do something different in your code? Because you have this shared code base. The only thing that's different is the storyboards. So sometimes you want to tell if you're on an iPad. Well, that's the way to do it, okay? I kind of recommend thinking about if there are other things to check first before checking if you're on an iPad, like are you in a split view controller, right? Is your current MVC in a split view controller? And I'm going to show you how you can check that. Or is the MVC that I want to talk to, or is myself, my MVC, on screen right now? Because on an iPad, it might be on screen because there's more room for and more MVCs to be on screen. Whereas on an iPhone, it might not be on screen. So there's something to check first. Before checking, am I on an iPad, just check, am I on screen? Or am I in a split view controller? Or am I in a popover, okay? So we're going to show how to check that, to check if you're in a split view controller in a second here. So here's what a split view controller looks like. We have a name for the left view. We call that the master. And the right view, we call the detail. And that's usually because there's a master-detail relationship between the two. What's changing in the master usually is affecting driving what's happening in the detail. Okay? So here's one in landscape mode and another one in portrait mode, a split view controller. Okay, this is a calculator. So it's got two MVCs, kind of a calculator keypad MVC, and then a calculator graph, or graphing MVC that knows how to graph things. Okay, so it's like a graphing calculator. The split view controller is designed to be at the top level, so don't put a split view controller inside a navigation controller or inside a tab bar controller. Just don't do it. Okay, it's not really designed to work that way. You can put those things inside it, in either side, but don't put the split view inside them. It's very simple to add one to your storyboard. You just drag it out, and then it's going to give you it's going to give you a master and a detail, which you're going to delete almost all the time. And then you just control drag to your master and control drag to your detail. Okay, just like a tab bar controller, it gets hooked up, same exact way. In your code, you want to be able to access the master and the detail, and there's two properties you need to know about that. One is the property in UI view controller called split view controller. So if you send split view controller getter to any UI view controller, it'll return what split view controller it's in, if it's in one, anywhere in it. Okay. If it's not in it, it'll return nil. So this is a good thing to check if you have conditional code that works one way on an iPad and one way on an iPhone, is whether you're in a split view controller or not, if your iPad interface is built on a split view controller. Now, once you find out what split view controller you're in, you can ask the split view controller, please tell me the detail and the master and the detail. And the way you do that is with this array in UI split view controller called view controllers. And that array always has 2 items in it. 0 is the master, 1 is the detail. So for example, if I had a master VC and it wanted to find out what the detail was in the same split view controller it's in, it would say self.splitviewcontroller.viewcontroller sub 1. Okay, and that would return nil if it's not in a split view controller at all. And if it is in a split view controller, it would return the detail. Okay? Make sense? And so one thing that's kind of interesting about split view controller, similar to table view data source, is it requires its split view controller delegate to be set. Okay, and why is this that it's required to be set? The answer is portrait mode. And I'm going to show you this in some pictures in the next couple of slides, why you need the delegate. The delegate is annoying. It's the most annoying delegate in all of iOS. Firstly, it has to be set very early, meaning in awake from nib. You can't wait till view did load to set your split view controller's delegate. Okay, so that's annoying. Second of all, it starts calling the delegate methods from the split view controller before view did load happens. So none of your outlets are set while it's calling its delegate methods. So that's annoying. So it's very difficult to deal with the split view controller delegate. Fortunately, it only has one simple responsibility, which is to control when the master and the detail appear in the landscape versus portrait modes. So you implement this method. This is kind of the gateway split view controller delegate method called split view controller should hide view controller in orientation. And it's going to ask you in landscape or in portrait, should I hide the master? Now, if you return no, that means never. That means the master and the detail will be on screen in both the landscape mode and the portrait mode. But that does mean that in portrait mode, the details can be kind of tall and skinny. Okay? The master is always tall and skinny. But the detail can be kind of unusually tall and skinny. But sometimes UI, this makes sense. Another thing to return besides no is to say only in portrait. Okay? So only hide the master in portrait. So now in landscape, you'll see the master and the detail. In portrait, you won't. But an important thing about this is, if I'm in portrait, how do I get at the master? And the answer is, it's going to give you a little bar button. You see that little blue bar button up in the corner there? You can barely see it. It's being pointed to by that yellow call out. That button, if I click on it, it's going to slide the master out. See? Slides the master out. If I click anywhere else in the detail, it goes away. Click on the button again, it slides the master out. Okay, so that's how I can get at the master, even in portrait mode. Okay? But I have to put that button somewhere. That's my responsibility, unfortunately. Okay? And I have to do it before all my outlets are set, so that makes it difficult to do. But how would that work? Okay, so to put that button there, the split view controller is going to send you, oh, by the way, if you don't implement the delegate, what's going to happen is in portrait mode, there's not going to be a button there, and so the user won't be able to get at the master. Okay, and that's a little frustrating for users. You could just say, well, just switch to landscape. You can have the master back. Maybe that's okay. I don't know. I don't think that's that great. Users would expect to be able to get at the master, even from portrait mode. Okay, so if you don't do the delegate, you won't have a button there. People won't be able to get at the master. So the way you put the button there is another split view delegate method will hide view controller with bar button item. And what that's saying is I'm going to hide the master. Here's a bar button to put somewhere on the screen that when the user clicks it, it'll slide back. Okay? So here's a simple